Hey, Stephen, thanks for submitting your article to Serious Scrum. I'm going to do a video review. Just talk you through some of my ideas about the article and help you improve it to make it even better. Um, so here we go. Your title is The 6-Day Story, How Blocking and Wait Times Derail Our Sprints. Um, the 6-day story doesn't reveal much to me about what the article will be about. So I'm not sure, how it can capture the reader's interest. The subtitle, that's more clear. So you could think about, changing them around. Um, you provided an unsplash photo, quite generic. It's good because it's right free. It shows a calendar. I think context to your article. Would be even better if you add an authentic photo, which gives us a better picture on your own work environment in the context of this article. So let's start reading, shall we? So while we strive for tasks that are independent of one another. So who's we? Is that you? Is that developers or team? Um, and do we strive for tasks that are independent of another? What's a task? What's the difference between a product backlog item, which requires collaboration generally to get it done, versus independent tasks? Um, interdependencies aren't necessarily challenging. They can just, they can just require teamwork, right? So it depends on what they're dependent upon. Um, so yeah, could be good to emphasize as your experience, right? It's in your experience, this is the case, and in your experience, developers are often nervous about changing an area in flux. And then an area in flux, what does that mean specifically? That's not clear. You mentioned the reason working on something constantly changing underneath you isn't easy. Um, I think you will get into venture into that area of the sprint goal, which is a fixed target for the whole team to collaborate towards. Where's the direction towards it may be dynamic, and they self-manage the way working towards it. So in that situation, doesn't necessarily have to be uneasy. The best case is increased difficulty in merge conflicts. I think you're mentioning this with tongue in cheek. While the worst case is needing to start over, as the two sets of changes end up being incompatible. Although I don't really know what the specific context is here, and I find it difficult to kind of map it to my own experience, it would be good if you were to give a real example in your situation. So even if our work isn't building upon earlier tasks, working towards a focused sprint, there we go, will result in tasks that modify the same area of the code base. A meaningful, valuable sprint goal typically happens when we aggregate work. And maybe, again, it's good to explicitly mention it's your scenario. For me, it's generally the other way around, that you have a goal and then the team defines its work towards that goal, not aggregating work and then defining a sprint goal. So if we were to map the work contributing to our sprint goal, we might prefer to look something like the following in providing a picture. So you're mapping the work that's contributing to your sprint goal. You could also consider, invite your team to set a sprint goal and then define the work needed towards it. Right? Either case, it's up to the team. So you mentioned ideally our sprint goals are the combination of work split across the entire development team. So in a new Scrum guide, it mentions developers. In your context, you may just refer to them as development team. That's fine. But we do generally, for transparency, having shared understanding, want to promote the language used in the latest Scrum guide developers. However, your process often end up creating a sprint that looks more like, everybody working on their own thing. I think that's what this picture represents. And that the stories are not related. Or sprint goals are small number of stories that are barely related. So again, you talk about stories. In Scrum, we generally talk about product backlog items versus work items, which are often visualized in the sprint backlog. Stories, although I think you mentioned here user stories, I'm not sure. It could be developer stories, so that may be good to kind of explain, because people use that language differently in different contexts. A simple piece of math, this is continuing with the next paragraph, a simple piece of math reveals that the main culprit preventing us from achieving our sprint goals. When the average story blocks subsequent work for 6 days, then the sprint goal cannot include any work dependent on anything else that sprint. All right. So again, it may be good to emphasize what you're talking about. User stories, or you talk about product backlog items, you talk about individual work items, tasks. What specifically are you referring to here? So how stories end up taking 6 days will vary between teams. But the most common reason I have experienced is the combination of asynchronous workflows and blocking heavy structures. So I'm thinking I'm going to read the stories as if it were a product backlog item that requires collaboration to get it done. And in your case, you're experiencing that the total cycle time, the age, the duration of that work depends on wait times and how it flows between stages. Again, now you're talking about task here, where you start with story, so that can be confusing too. When all work for a story takes place, and again, story again, now with until we can merge back into the main branch, all dependent is blocked. Just checking for consistency here. If your use of stories is consistent with capital S. We'll have to check that. Now another visualization. You have your developers here, development, code reviews, waiting times in between testing and merging. That's a really nice picture. I like it a lot. It looks like you created it, so if not, make sure to attribute it, but I think it's yours. It's wonderful. Consider a developer performs all work for feature on a branch and adds code review testing. Yeah. 3 days of work spread out across 6, because the handover times and wait times. Yeah, clear. Yeah, so you refer to math. I'm not sure if that's, I understand how you use it, your calculations. Is that really math? Even block pair 3 days coming in. Yeah. Long running blocking work inhibiting collaboration integration. Yeah. Affecting sprint goals. All right, that's the next one. So you're finding sufficient parallelizable work towards a goal can be challenging, leading to sprint goals, which are a small percentage of teams overlap versus sprint. Yeah. I'm not sure if you're going to go there, but have you considered that, you can collaborate, you can work together, you can pair up, you can learn from each other. Just because someone can do something on their own, and just because you could technically do it in parallel, does that really mean you should? You want your knowledge to travel, you want your individual and your team to learn from each other. You don't want that single point of failure. Um, so if they're working together, they can instantly review each other's work without any handoffs and wait times. But that's maybe something you're going to get into. So um, yeah, sprint goals may feel pointless if there's not something to work together towards. They often end up being a single story or a list of the separate work. So yeah, you can really try and identify like where does this goal emerge from? Is it just a summary of the work that you're doing? Maybe a summary of the things in your backlog, or does it give us um, a clear objective to collaborate towards? That allowing developers to kind of manually pick and choose the work needed to complete it. So, and then, this is also where maybe the product owner comes into play, right? To help define clear objectives, so that the team can properly understand which product backlog items to select in their sprint planning. Increasing complexity in all cognitive modes. So here we go. Teams often adjust to six-state problem by taking on additional complexity. Yeah, if they're waiting, they're taking on some extra work, right? You get more, by ineffective branching, maybe good to explain what that means. So it could be like you have multiple branches open for a longer amount of time. Carry over work between sprints. Yeah, if you meet your sprint goal, is this typically bad or not? Is it something to consider? Like what is carryover work? Yeah, and by spreading themselves across multiple teams of unrelated work. Yeah, so now you're kind of subdividing a development team into sub teams, which is of course not something you'd want. But of course they can self-manage and pair up and make triads and quads, aligning on how to achieve the goal. Normalizing carryover means that some sprint results in the team needing to split their focus between a large number of divergent tasks. Needs maybe to split their focus. I'm sure if the meeting is right. Right, this again, it's good, right? Because it looks like a traffic jam and probably acts like a traffic jam. And not only does branching of branches mean that there are multiple concurrent versions of the feature at once, but changes need to propagate across all branches regardless of their current stage. Yeah. I like these visualizations. The main consequence of these adaptations is reduction in focus, right? Yeah. Team's attention is split between multiple epics. So now we introduce the term of epics. What's an epic? Maybe good to explain what that means in your context, because it's not defined in Scrum, and there's different interpretations of the term epics wandering around the board. Consider what an epic is in relation to a product goal or a sprint goal. So the team needs to spend more time and energy simultaneously understanding requirements of each piece of unrelated work. All right, continuing on. So here you talk about tracking statuses and ensuring requirements haven't got lost. You could reconsider, like, to what purpose are we tracking statuses? Who's tracking statuses for what? Is it just the developers amongst themselves making progress towards the sprint goal visible? Ensuring requirements. So we're specifically talking about the term requirements here, like inconsistency in use of language. We have stories, we have epics, we have requirements. What's really required in Scrum? Who impose, like, are these requirements imposed to the team, or is the team self-managing their own requirements? What they think is required in the product? Yeah. So difficult to remember where they got to go on what task they worked on a sprint ago and just become unblocked. Yeah, so clear. Six-day story has impact beyond the sprint in your situation, right? So what a team could deliver in the sprint, 6-day story will spread across many months. That I don't really properly understand. I mean, I do understand, of course, if you have one day each sprint, maybe then yes. But that drops a bit out of the blue to me. So delaying both the time to deliver the feature and opportunities to receive feedback. Because that's consistent and consequently hard to estimate. Scrum burnout. Interesting. The connection between blocking duration and missing sprint goals isn't always obvious. The team can get trapped in a cycle where they're always only just missing their goals. So you could consider the term always. Could you imagine times they are not just missing their goals, or are they really always just missing their goals, or sometimes? Instead of realizing the underlying cause, they feel like they just got unlucky or need to continue making minor adjustments to the process. The situations quickly becomes demoralizing, can result in team rejecting the practice of sprint goals or even Scrum entirely. So we often see that, right? That they abandon then the practices that are designed to make them better over time. Because addressing the root causes can be very difficult and hard and stressful. Yeah, you explain that perhaps all that focus on sprint goals seems very arbitrary, and those outside of Scrum often wonder why Scrum teams place this too big limitation on themselves. Is it a limitation? Is it a limitation? It's a maybe limitation by design, or is it an enabler? We're not doing these things to satisfy any rules of Scrum. Rather, we focus on sprint goals because of the positive impact working in a coherent and focused manner has on the team. I love that. Structuring our processes so that multiple people are contributing to a single goal with minimal friction leads to better outcomes and better developer quality of life. Can you give an example in your situation how it's improved your life or a developer on your team? Can you provide an example, maybe what a minimal friction is in context to a better outcome? What is a better outcome in your example, in your situation, in your work? Yeah, this is, I think, a nice metaphor about ignoring your problems, right? Ken Schwaber mentioned that, Scrum is much like your mother-in-law pointing out all your flaws. It very much functions as a mirror. Sometimes it's better to remove the mirror so it doesn't show you what is real. In theory, sprint goals and the short horizon of sprint encourage teams to solve blockers, remove impediments, reduce bureaucracy, and restructure the process to minimize wait and blocking time. In practice, reducing block time is more complicated than it sounds. The behavior resulting in a 6-day story are often entrenched and hard to remove. It's challenging to sell our teams what they might perceive as a temporary reduction in quality, with the promise that increased momentum we'll see it shoot back up. All right, I just want to break this one down. Challenging to sell, right? Now, this is a conundrum because you want to respect the self-managing nature of the developers, right? That they are the specialists. So what are you really selling? You know, what do they really need? Can they express what they really need? And can you work from their needs rather than inflict what you think they need? That's something to want to contemplate. As what they might perceive as temporary reduction in quality. It's not explicit how this would generate a reduction in quality. I'm not sure where this comes from, or can you maybe give an example of this? Um, Without blocking overhead, we can size each piece of work to find the ideal balance between blocking impact and complexity. We can structure tasks into iterative steps. And what's the difference between an iterative step and a task, right? Well, you can structure tasks iteratively, step maybe. Minimizing the amount of work in flight at a time makes it easier to integrate each change. And smaller stories reduce change. Change is risk. Smaller stories reduce the risk of change. I'm not sure what this means. Increase the consistency of our work and improve our ability to estimate. With right-sized stories, we can optimize for momentum and team morale. In what way? And what is a right-sized story? What do you mean by that? Small? Small enough that there's a lot of confidence that we completed that sprint by working together. When less time is spent managing the complexity of work, more time can be spent on the stories themselves. Yeah, if you're not focusing on the ways you work, you're focusing on the outcome of your work. Solutions will depend on a specific situation for the team, but in general, we should aim to integrate changes as soon as the coding effort is complete. So all of these steps that you outline shouldn't block follow-on work. Yeah, you can imagine like if you're playing in a sports team, you need to pass the ball. You need to be able to, players need to be available to be able to pass the ball along effectively. You don't want to be like, hey, here's a pass, and somebody not being able to accept your pass because they already are busy with the ball, and that causes that a lot of balls become idle on the field. So yeah, you identify parallel work as maybe a source of that waste. Ultimately, successful Scrum is interwoven with many modern development practices. So you mentioned a couple of patterns and practices, feature flags by Martin Fowler, synchronous code reviews. It's your own article, yeah. And trunk-based development. Yeah, that picture looks a little better, doesn't it? Yeah. I love this article. Definitely passes my review. Hopefully, this review gave you some ideas on how to make it even better before you publish it. We'll make sure you can submit it to us if you can't already. That makes our review easier. Because it's not submitted, I can't really check it for grammatically in detail. So I can recommend you probably already do, but you use something like Grammarly to check the content. It's a 6-minute read. It's quite a long read, but not too long, I would say. You've got nice visualizations mixing with the content, so it's well structured. I could, here you have a couple of titles following each other quite regularly, but then here's another one, but then there comes a long bit at the end. So you may want to consider adding another header here between somewhere, if that, of course, fits the structure of your article. So, all right, that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Thanks so much for submitting it to us. Take care.